Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast, the podcast designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is Narelle Montgomery from Sutherland Podiatry Centre in New South Wales. She is a Sharkies supporter. So, Narelle, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Tyson. How are you? Thanks for having me on the podcast.
No, I've asked. I think I asked you a long time ago to come on the podcast, and you sort of you ummed and ahed.
Well, I didn't have much to talk about, so I think that's the reason why.
And what I think is funny, you graduated the same year that I did, 1988. You've been around for, therefore, 35 years. And what was funny is when you filled in a bit of your bio and you said, I've been practicing for 35 years, I went, geez, that's a long time. You've been around for a while. I forgot that I have been around for the same amount of time.
It goes fast. First few
It
years were
does.
like very long, but the last 20 have just zoomed past.
It does go really quick. And we've seen a lot of changes over that 35 years as well.
We certainly have, my God.
But before we get on to that, I need to ask you the question, why podiatry? What got you into podiatry in the first place back in the olden days?
Oh God, that's a very interesting question. I actually had gone to uni to do computer programming back when it was
Oh,
very,
punch
very, very.
cards.
Sorry?
Punch cards. Remember punch cards?
Yes. Actually, I did that when I was on my year 10 student placements, actually for work experience. I did that at Sydney University. And oh my God, hasn't life changed since then? So I did that for 12 months, absolutely hated it. And I had a cousin who had done podiatry. And he said, oh, it's great. I mean, and I remember when he graduated, when I first moved to Sydney and I lived with my aunt and uncle, the phone didn't stop ringing with him getting job offers everywhere. And I thought, wouldn't it be good to
What was
go?
his name? Is he still around?
Oh no, he lasted 12 months in podiatry. He
That's
he
funny.
yeah, he got into selling drugs. He got into working for the drug companies as a
Oh,
sales
okay.
rep, and he runs a whole division in Switzerland now. So he's gone from
Oh,
strength
so
to
legal
strength.
drugs. He got into legal drugs. That's a good thing then.
Legal drugs, yeah, legal drugs. So yeah, he lives in Switzerland now. I can't remember. I think he works for Merck Sharp and Dome now. So
Okay, but it's interesting. But it was through him that you were exposed to
yeah,
podiatry in the first place.
yes,
You've pursued it
exactly.
for 35 years and he shot through after 12
After
months.
12 months, I know. So, and even like 35 years, I still wonder. So, yeah, he said, why don't you try podiatry? So, um, I did. My uncle knew the woman who ran the podiatry section at TAFE in New South Wales because he was also a TAFE teacher, and he ran across her and said, oh, my niece might be interested. And she said, tell her to come in for an interview. So, next minute, I'm in on an interview, and they said, you've got the position. And then I had to start the next week. So it was a whirlwind, and I must admit, I really enjoyed it. I went back from a class of like 300 at Sydney Uni doing
Yeah.
chemistry and maths back to a classroom of like 30 people that I got to know very, very well. And even to this day, I've still got quite a few of them are very close friends, and we get together a couple of times a year and whinge and bitch and reminisce and have a great time. But and they're still in the profession too. So
Yeah, I was going to
yeah.
say, how many of them from those days are still working?
Oh, so I think by the time we graduated, there's only about 22 of us.
Yeah.
And I'm sure out of that now, probably maybe 15, 16 are still in it. A few we haven't seen in years, but the core ones I see, there's about 5 of us that still get together. And like
Okay.
we all got married about the same time, we all had our children about the same time. So it's very good to get together and find out, what each other's up to and what our children are up to next and all that else. Yeah,
And you're all in the
quite a bit of
same
fun.
sort of area?
No, there's quite a few. We're up in, excuse me, Newcastle and the Central Coast, some in the northern parts of Sydney, all over the place actually. So, but not close to each other. So that's why we're going to get together once every 6 months or 12 months or so.
Okay,
So
what
yeah,
about at conferences? Do you catch up then? Do you send messages to each other and say, "Hey, I'm going to the conference. Do you want to catch
we
up?"
do actually. We do. So who's going to do which conference so
Yeah.
we can all get together. And I must admit, the last couple, none of us were that enthused. I think we're just getting old and jaded.
Oh, I think
And
the last conference was boring as well.
yeah,
Not that it was boring. There wasn't a lot of. There were some interesting talks, but there wasn't a lot of variety in the interesting
yeah.
talks, and there was a
And
lot
that's
of the just the same. It was just the same stuff.
stuff, yeah. And from our point of view too, it's become really expensive.
Yeah.
So with the cost of living crisis, which I'm kind of sick of hearing about, it was expensive to go to. It meant, days off work. It meant, travel to and from, which, your $99 deals that you used to get on air flights now no longer are there. So it just there wasn't enough there to interest me to go. And as you know, when you've been around for a long time, we've seen a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of things have got a lot better, and like the information out there has improved out of sight compared to when we graduated. But it still has to be something special now to get me on a plane to go somewhere.
So do you remember your first conference?
Yes, it was in Sydney. Oh
Okay.
my God, 1992, I think it was, like my big proper national, yeah. They had the one that was on 2 years before that, I think it was in Melbourne. I couldn't afford to go, but I saved up to go to Sydney, and it was just catching up with everybody, so, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember, I think the first conference I went to was a Queensland-based one.
Yeah.
And Simon Bartold was like the main speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I joke around with him all the time that there was only, I said from the whole conference, the only one line I can remember was him making a joke about hemorrhoids. And when I caught up with him, not too long ago, and I mentioned that, he said, that's the only thing you can remember from my whole talk. And I went, that is it.
I used to go to conferences with the idea that if I got one good thing out of there, it was worthwhile. And that's usually all I used to get out of most conferences, was just one good thing.
Yeah.
But I found out years later, the stuff I actually did absorb, I'd come and do, and I go, oh, you did it. And I'd go, and he would go, how do you know that? I go, oh, I actually saw that at a conference. And I go, oh, so I did find, it was a great place, but I used to find when they used to bring up all the stats and all their research, it used to drive me insane.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to know what they were looking at, why they were looking at it, what were the results were, and how can I use it. I didn't need to know every graph, because I didn't understand half of that anyway.
Death by PowerPoint, I call it. It's death by PowerPoint. I've seen some talks where they'll just have one chart after another chart, and they must be able to just look out at the crowd and just see all the eyes glazing over.
Yeah.
And so it's never fun when they're doing that.
I went to a conference years ago in Hawaii with one of my co-workers, and we went to this one conference, and the guy just literally read out his PowerPoint, and it was monotone. He didn't change, he'd go up and down, and we just looked at each other and thought, we don't need to be here. He's boring the pants off us. So we always sit at the back. So if we got out, we weren't seen. And they had one at that conference about bioterrorism and the podiatrists, and we thought, holy dooly, that's got to be interesting. So we turned up, again, we sat in the back, and then this guy walked in. So this was, probably 15 years ago. And this guy turned up, and back then, the American conferences, all the guys turned up in Hawaii looking like Magnum PI. Yeah. Old Magnum PI.
As you
they
should.
All had mustaches, and they had pocket protectors for their pens, and they had socks and Crocs. That was a bit scary. So this guy came in, and he'd met us at a breakfast meeting. And he came in and he said, why are you two here? He said, you're in Australia. Who would want to go to Australia and do a bioterrorism? And we went, you're so right, and we left. There was just nothing of interest in that talk. So we just turned around, left, and went shopping, as you do.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I think when you go into a conference now, I think majority of people I know who go to a conference are going there to two reasons: catch up with friends, meet some new people, do some networking. Some are there for headhunting and things like that. Or the other reason is all the suppliers are in one place. So it's an opportunity to go and look at new equipment that you've maybe seen in the magazines that they've posted out to you. I actually reckon if all the suppliers got together and just did a suppliers event over 2 days outside of the association and just put it on themselves, it'd be a lot cheaper for them and a lot cheaper for everybody to attend. You still catch up with friends and get to see all the toys.
Exactly. And that's part of the reason I used to go to, is like, I need to buy new instruments, or I need to buy some new equipment. I'll go check it out and see what type of deal I can get done too, which was always great.
Well, I remember when we got a Shockwave, that's how we went with the Shockwave. I'd read about it, heard a little bit more about it, and then went to a conference. It was there, got to play around with it, and I went, okay, give me two.
Yeah, exactly. And they would have, they've done well this conference.
Yeah, so there's benefits of going along to it, but I think that's why it's really important. You just got to pick the right ones to go to.
Yeah, Yeah. So I find the more personalised ones, so like the ones like Simon Bartold runs, Craig Payne. I used to go to all his. Every time he'd come to Sydney, I would go because I
Yeah.
would pick up one nugget that I would utilise really, really well. So I love seeing Craig.
Yeah. It's easy to heckle when you're in a smaller group too. Like when
And
you're in a smaller group, there's a lot more banter. So you were at
yeah,
Jonathan Small's Work Smarter, Not Harder weekend a few
yes.
weeks back. And how many funny lines were just thrown out amongst the group when somebody would be
Oh,
saying
yes.
something and all of a sudden someone would say something inappropriate and everyone would crack up laughing. To me, that's what you get from small groups that you do not get unless the person on stage is extremely good at what they do.
They do.
Most of them are not entertaining. So you're either there for the information, you're not there for the entertainment.
Yeah. And also too, like the smaller groups, like I mean, I'm not particularly keen around a lot of strangers. It kind of scares me a bit. But like the second day from the Work Smarter course, when you had us all work together,
Yeah.
it was great because all these people were going, "Oh, Narelle, you've done this. Could you talk to me about this?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm more than happy to tell you what I know." And we found that becoming the groups in those small tables, we got to know each other really, really well, and we had a lot of laughs. Whether we answered half the questions, I don't know, but we had a good time.
I think we all had a good time.
I think we did.
I did. I went into it because I hadn't done a live workshop with anybody. I haven't done a lot sharing it with other people, but I hadn't done one since probably COVID to that
Yeah,
extent
yeah,
where we put a lot of
yeah.
time and effort into getting it all done. And leading up to it, I went, I'm never going to do this again. I said, this was so much hard work putting this on. But then when we finished, I'm sitting down in the bar area afterwards and I went, I cannot wait to do the next one.
Next one, exactly.
Okay, that was so much fun. I got such an adrenaline rush from it. I went, I've got to do this again. I remember why I like actually speaking.
Yeah, and you find too, you're on the way home in the plane and you sit there with a notebook and start writing, what's the next thing I can do about? I always do that. That's what I always enjoy about a plane ride back home is I've said all the things I've been learning and write it all down. This is the next thing I'm going to try. This is the next thing I'm going to try. This is the next thing I'm going to try.
Yeah, so you're using your brain book?
I have, look, I've even got it right here in front of me, look, and I've got 5,000 pieces of paper hanging out. But yes, I actually had started something like that years ago, but I'd stopped. So it seems stupid and counterintuitive, but now I'm going back to it because I think better on paper. I'm not very good at typing up things on Word or anything. I'd rather write things by hand, different colours, different pictures. Yeah. It resonates quite well with me because I'm very much a paper and pen person.
Well, there's research on that the whole analog of writing notes on paper.
Yeah.
The retention of what you write down is so much better than if you're typing notes.
Yeah.
So it's really important for people to pick up a pen, get some paper. And that's why I gave everyone a book and said, all your notes from this weekend, put in one place, make this your brain book, and then just keep replacing it each year. Start a new brain book.
When I have new grads start with me, I always, part of their little package when they start is a book. I always put a writing book in there and some coloured pens. And I go, I expect this at every meeting that we have together. Have it there. Even when you think of things, write the questions down to ask me at that meeting. And, half of them do write, half of them don't. Half of them I find lying around the clinic or torn to shreds or whatever.
Yeah.
And, all you can do is, lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
No, even if you flog it, it still won't drink.
Yeah.
So let's get. I want to get. So with you got into podiatry. You started. Did you want to work for yourself or?
God, no.
No, you didn't. It wasn't on the cards.
No, God, I was happy to work for other people. And I think, and I say this because I am a clinical supervisor at Western Sydney Uni. I do instruct the kids. I go, don't work for someone and get your skills up to start with. And that was always my goal, to go work for someone. And if I had someone who treated me really well, I would be happy just to stay an employee. But things didn't turn out that way. And then I met my husband, and he had his own small business too. And he kind of encouraged me. He said, you should be out with your own business. And I was like, oh. And I must admit, I wouldn't have done half the things in my life if it wasn't for my husband. He really pushed me. I'm very much, I'll stand in the background. As you know, when you saw me at the workshop, where did I sit? Right up in the back.
Right at the back. You said that when you walked in the room. I'm sitting at the back.
Yeah, like sitting at the back. And it was my husband who's pushed me. He's been, the quiet achiever in the background who he pushes me, and I'm been so grateful for that. At times I could kill him, But everyone encouraged me. And, having your own business is not for the faint-hearted. I don't care what
No.
anyone says. We've had a lot of ups and downs in 35 years. It's a wonder we're still married, actually. But, he hangs in there. He knows that, like, I'm off the tools now because of a few events, which we probably want to talk about later with me. But I'm still going in and out. When people are off sick, I go and replace them. And he's like, yeah, I thought you'd kind of given up work. Well, no, it's a private practice. There's still things that need to be done.
Yeah, and if
But
you're still around, you are the backup person.
exactly. And they're always on the phone to me every second or third day. It's like, oh, with a question, it's like, yeah, I'm glad to know. I've still kind of got my finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
I know what's happening, and with everything online now, I can see exactly what's happening at the practice. I've got cameras around. I've got all my software is all cloud based, so I can see at any particular point of time what's going on and where.
But it's good when you get your practice to that point where you've got other podiatrists working there and you sort of take a real big step back. To me, that's when business sometimes becomes fun because you're no longer dependent on them having to be there.
Yeah.
Because you're not like, oh, if you leave, I'm stuffed. It's like, well, if you leave, I'll just dive in and do the work until I find a replacement, and then I'll step back again. So all of a sudden, you become less dependent on your team, and I think your team feels that too. That they know you're there to support them, and if something happens, you're there to dive in as well.
Yeah, and I find too that, it's then that your work finally becomes I won't say entrepreneur. I really don't like that term that much. I think it's bandied around a lot, but you find then you actually have a business, another job.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I had that mindset for years that if I wasn't actually physically working in the practice, it will fall down without me. And I slowly got myself down to 2 days a week. But even with that, I used to think, well, they need me there. And if I stopped working there, I could not draw any money from the clinic. And then when something horrible happened to me and I had no choice but to walk out of the practice, I found out that the team I had there were simply incredible and very supportive. And that the practice did make enough money that I could still support myself without physically being on the tools. But I had that negative mindset for ages. And that was a great thing that Jonathan spent a lot of time about, was our mindset.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And I must admit, I've got his book too. I finally got it off Amazon the other day. I've been reading the Kindle version. And, half the book is on mindset. It's not all about, what you need to do in a business. It's getting your head around, this is how you should be thinking to get ahead, because it's not going to happen otherwise. And
well, it's so true though. Because one of the things when I do the next 12-week reboot, which I was telling you offline, is going to probably be a 2-day intensive podiatry business reboot. And one of the things I'm really going to be including in there is, I've spoken about marketing in the past. You have strategic level and tactical level. So strategy is really the goals and plans that you want to achieve, and the tactics are exactly what you're going to do to achieve it. But I'm going to spend a lot more time as well on the meta level, which is the mindset level, because depending what your mindset is, will really have a huge impact on what strategy you choose and what tactics you choose.
Definitely.
So if things are going terrible, you can make some bad choices. If things are going great, you're going to make better choices. So it's how can you get yourself in that better mindset to make the better choices?
But haven't you found too, Tyson, after all these years, like when you and I graduated back in the 80s, we're old timers.
Yeah.
And being a blokey bloke, and my husband's a blokey bloke, that mindset stuff, that's all, you don't do, there's nothing wrong with my
I was about to say something really inappropriate then. Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't, because there's some people out there who are sensitive.
Yeah. And it's very much, and it's the last, especially over COVID with, mental health, no one ever talked about mental health years ago. And mindset years ago. And even my husband now, I'll talk about mindset. And he just looks at me and goes, well, isn't that obvious, Narelle? And I'm going, yes, it is. So it's very good that all these types of things that we're talking about now, if you had talked about this 30 years ago, people would just say, go back into la la land, come back to the reality. And the problem is that is reality, is how your mind thinks.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I got exposed to a lot of positive stuff in the 80s.
Yeah.
I came across Zig Ziglar really early on when I was younger. And I'm going, who is this lunatic from Yazoo, Mississippi, who came from a small town, and his town was that small. They didn't even have their own, like Village Idiot. They had to share one with the village next door or something like that. And this guy just cracked me up. I thought, he is hilarious.
Yeah.
And he told all these stories about positive thinking and motivation. So, yeah, I might have been like 19, 20 when I came across it. So even when I was going through podiatry, I sort of had a positive outlook on what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Not that I
Yeah.
always lived my life that way, but because it
Again, I
takes
find when I
time.
met my husband, yeah, he kind of exposed me to all that. And like to the, we actually did a Anthony Robbins thing many, many years ago, and the hot coals. I mean, that was the epitome of mindset is
Yeah.
walking across hot coals. I'm going, I'm not doing that. And you go, my husband, she can do it. My husband has more faith in me than I have in myself. So he's been a great partner for me through our whole lives together type of thing. And he did the firework. He said, come on. And I did it. And I was like, my God, I can do it. And I think I should look back and think, actually, I can achieve what I put my mind to. That's half the problem is I think a lot of us are very much negative. I've always been a bit of a negative. He's the positive, I'm the negative.
Yeah.
And you need someone in the background pushing you, going, no, you can actually do this. You can do this. And when I do it, I come back and go, guess what? I've done this. And he goes, duh. Of course you can do
Duh.
it.
I always like that. It's
You
always a
can do
great
it.
word, duh.
Yeah.
So can I
So,
ask you a question? You mentioned something before about you had health issues. Are we allowed to talk about that?
yeah. So what happened was, first of April in 2020, my mum rang me and said, I've just been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And my
Oh
whole
shit,
life
that's no
has
good.
come apart. Yeah. So I live in Sydney. My mum lived in Foster, which is about a 3.5 hour drive away, about 350 k's. And pretty much that I spoke to her at lunchtime, and it was a Thursday, and my Thursdays are like an 8 to 8 day. And I just came inside in tears. I went and sat out the back of the practice to ring her to say what's going on, because my mum never rang me unless there was something wrong.
Yeah.
Came back in the practice and I said, my mum's got cancer. And I started crying, and they just gave me my bag and said, go.
Mm.
So I walked out and I was gone for 5.5 months.
So, and
And
that's when you know you've got the right team in place, is because
oh,
you have the
incredible.
ability to do that. And there's a lot of people that have had businesses for a long period of time that they'd be saying to mum, that's terrible, mum, but I can't leave. Or I
Yeah,
can come for a couple of days, but I have to go back again. So that's when you
yeah.
know you've got things in place set
That's
up
it.
pretty
And
well.
I was grateful because like I had been working with like Core Right and Clinic Mastery, and they had got me set up. So I had slowly changed things. So my software system was now on the cloud, and I was starting using Google a lot more. So Google Docs, Google, my G Drive and this type of thing. And I changed it, like I was in MYOB, that finally became cloud-based. And so I rang my husband and I told him what happened. I said, I'm coming home, I'm driving to Foster. He said, you're not going anywhere because I'm frightened you will have an accident. He said, come
Yeah.
home. I had to go buy a computer. And guess when that happened? Right at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
So I had to go buy a computer. Of course, I couldn't buy one. I go to JB Hi-Fi. There's 20 computers out. I went, just give me that one. They went, no. I go, that one, no. And I said, well, what can I buy? And they said, anything that doesn't have a black dot. And I'm thinking, why are they just selling what's on the floor? So I found one with a black dot. And I said, okay, there you go. Can I have this? And they said, yep. And then I couldn't buy a camera. And it was one of those flip ones that had the camera at the bottom. So every Zoom call I did, you just got my jowls. So that wasn't particularly attractive.
Good picture of the chin.
Yeah. So I moved up to Foster, and I had to go and put the internet on at my mum's house because she didn't have it.
Yeah, it
And
sounds like my mum.
yeah, and my mum, my sister and I nursed my mum until she passed away.
Oh, so she did pass away. That's no good.
Yeah, it was one of the most horrific times. So between watching her fade to nothing and being told that only one of us could leave the house to go and get groceries, and because my sister and I were travelling to and from, she was from Canberra, I'm in Sydney. We actually took photos of our mum and her diagnosis in case the cops pulled us over to say, why are you travelling, into the country areas, because they were
Yeah.
closing a lot of that off too.
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't pulled over once. And I lived in one of those LGAs where they were shutting us down. We weren't even allowed to go 5 k's from our house. So I was, and the information was changing daily. My poor staff are going, what are we supposed to do now? And then we're running out of gloves. I couldn't buy things. And between that and crying every morning when I go for a walk, so mum didn't see me upset, because she didn't need to be more upset than, what was going on. It was a struggle, but as I said, I had the most incredible team behind me. And people who I thought would let me down didn't.
Yeah.
Who were there, and there were some where I could only do team meetings on a Saturday. Some refused to come, and that was their prerogative. But on the whole, everyone did what they could to help me. And then when I came back, after Mum had passed, they virtually, I've got one admin who's very upfront with me, which I appreciate. And she said, we don't want you back. And I went, really? And she said, no. She said, we've turned all your crazy patients to all the rest of the pods. And they said, if you come back, you're just going to stir up our system. So no,
Yeah.
don't come back. I went, okay, you don't have to tell me twice. So I've been working from home ever since. So, you know, I've got all I do redo the policies and procedures. We've gone through accreditation a couple of times, so I've done all that. And then I've been working at the uni as well and doing a bit of business mentoring. So my work's pretty busy, but I'm still there for when someone is calling in sick.
Yeah.
Or off on holidays. I can still work my schedule around that.
But I think that's a really important thing you point out there. When the shit hits the fan, the right team members will step up and will take up the slack, and they will work harder. They'll be there earlier. They'll stay later. Those that aren't team players, who are probably never going to be, are the ones that won't change. They'll still just rock up at the same time, still bitch and complain about things, and you're going, hang on, my mother's dying, and you're complaining about friggin' some instruments or something. And you're going, do you see the correlation, how this isn't really working? And they're the ones that usually don't hang around.
Yeah, exactly. And it brought out, like, so I've got my second in charge, my clinic director now. He's really stood up and said, I want to, and do this and this in the business. So he wants to learn, so to take over the reins when I'm ready to hand it over. And he was brilliant. So he took a lot of that burden off me. But I must admit, everyone else stepped up. A few people kind of, when I came back, decided, okay, I've done enough for you in a row. I'm going to become slack again. And that was fine. We worked with that, and they self-selected down the track as well, which was even better. But I was very fortunate that team stood behind me when it really, really went pear-shaped really fast.
And that's the importance of that. That's why I encourage people, like if you have a business, is you want the business. Initially, you have to put the work in, but long term, you want to get the business to a point where you do have a team behind you. So if something happens, you can step away and things don't crumble around you.
Yeah, exactly. So now that was the point too. I knew, oh my God, I have a business, where before I just had bought myself a job as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
But I have a business now, and I physically don't have to work in it anymore, which was wonderful. But I mean, that took many years, which I could have done that earlier, I think. But I think with the change of technology, meaning, like I was on front desk, which I thought was a great practice management system, but they kept refusing to go onto the cloud. So I moved to Clinico, and yes, some of the reporting wasn't as good, but it was aesthetically a lot better and easier to use.
Yeah. What were you with beforehand? What were you using?
Front desk.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which was a great software, but I mean, now they're on the cloud. I think they had so many people leave that they had to change their strategy there. But I'm with Clinico now, and part of the reason with Clinico was that it would link up with other softwares that I've used part of my marketing, like Clinic apps and stuff like that. So I'm trying to automate as many things as I can, so I physically don't have to sit and do it or rely on someone else to do it.
Yeah.
So that's the good part of having good systems is running through it, starting someone. So I've got systems now for my admin team. We have a Google site, and virtually I can take someone off the street and say, okay, here's page 1. Start reading. This will tell you exactly what needs to be done every day and how you do it.
So, I think it's important that you've got to find a practice management program that just really works for you. We had front desk as well. And then I went and spoke to some computer people I knew, and I said, I need this to be up in the cloud so I can access it anywhere.
Yeah.
And they're saying, and then they spoke to front desk, and front desk said, well, we don't have it in the cloud. And this mob said, well, we can get it at the, so they got mine up there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't technically through front desk. It was sort of like, it was like a pretend one up there, and all my other computers linked into it. And that works perfectly for us.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, how good is that? Because we were getting to a stage there, our front desk thing was so big, the amount of information on there, we had to go buy new computers to take it. And it was like pretty much every 2 years I had to renew computers because we didn't have enough storage.
Oh, and then people making sure people backed it up, and
whereas
exactly. Being up in the cloud, you don't worry about it these days.
And then someone would lose the hard drive from our backup from Tuesday, or we're mixing it up with the Friday one. It was like, oh my God! But now with it all on the cloud, it's just, now it's just making it safe. So making sure everyone has 2-factor authentication and all those type of things.
Yeah, but it's even my desktop computer now though. I get these messages all the time. You haven't backed up for 420 days. I don't
Yeah.
need to back up.
No.
Everything on my computer is in the cloud.
In the clouds.
And
Yeah.
the stuff
So
that's
fine.
on the desktop or that's on the actual computer, it's only because I'm just working on it at the moment, and I've got a copy of everything.
Yeah.
It's always somebody else. So yeah, you don't cloud. The cloud has made life a lot easier.
I know. But do you remember when we first started? Remember we were writing on cards?
Oh my God! Remember the little white ones, the little square
Yeah. Yeah,
six
that's
by
what I used
four
to write on
cards? That's
too.
what you used to write
Yeah.
everybody's clinic
Used to
notes
write
on.
everything on. Yep.
That was it.
And post-it notes and scraps of paper. Yep. And your appointment book was paper that you'd rubbed out so many times from cancellations that you'd rubbed the hole through the paper. So, well, I can't book anyone at 9 o'clock. I can't physically write on. So, yeah.
Well, I remember when I started, I didn't have that problem because it was my I got a computer pretty early on.
Ooh.
Yeah, I had a paper diary for the first 2 years, and I think my first computer that I got in the clinic was maybe 1990.
Oh my God. I didn't get one till about, I think, 97 or 98 or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember going to the computer shop and talking to this guy, and I said to him, "What's the difference between the 10 megabyte computer and the 20 megabyte computer?"
Yeah.
And he said, 10 megabytes. I said, oh, you're a smartass. You're hilarious. And he said, no, to be honest, he said, really, it's 10 megabytes. If I was you, I'd get the computer with a 10 megabyte hard drive. You will never fill it.
Fill it. I know.
I take a photo on my phone now, and it's more than 10 megabytes.
Yeah. I remember our first video camera, the guy said, you've got 35 gigs on there. You will not use that much. Oh my God, I've used that so much that I have to keep pulling off the old videos on it. But even now, actually, I used to sit that in the clinic to do videos to show the next person, this is how we do shockwave, this is how we do Swift, whatever. I can't even use it anymore because the quality is so poor.
Oh, yeah.
I'm better to use my phone. So now I just sit there, just pull out my phone and off I go. And it's so much easier. But, the quality of that compared to what's a couple of years ago is just astounding.
Yeah, I saw a video.
Technology.
I saw a video today that the quality of the video was actually really good. It was a UK video. The video itself was good. The information was great. The audio was great. But they had a lapel mic, and they must have just had the one lapel mic that they would take it off and then go and give it to the next person. And I'd see the wire just running down their shirt, like off into the distance. And I'm going, oh, and it was doing my head in. I'm just thinking, spend an extra 10 seconds and you could have just run up your shirt, just clipped it on, done the recording, and then taken it off, given it to the next. But there must have just been, oh, no one will notice this cord hanging off my shirt. And I'm going, oh, that looks so bad. But the video itself was good. So hopefully they hear this and go, maybe they're talking about us.
I hope so, yes.
So you've been in podiatry for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Which is longer than a lot of podiatrists have even been born.
I
know. I find this out when I bump into students, and I'll say, "Oh, back in 19 such and such," and they go, "No, I wasn't born until like 10 years later." And you go,
"I know. I'm hiring people that are younger than my kids, and that's freaking me out too." So yeah.
So what have been some of the biggest changes you've seen in the profession? Some of the biggest positive changes, because you always say that you have a tendency to sway on the negative sometimes. What have been the positive changes that you've seen in the profession over 35 years?
I think back to that technology, the amount of information that's available now. You and I used to have to go and get a textbook that would be 10 years old to look up information. Now it's the flick of a button on Google.
Oh, yeah.
I think the quality of people like yourself, the business community that we can tap into now to get help. So with you, with Clinic Mastery, with Podiatry Hive, with Paul Wright, with all the business mentors, that has I don't know why someone wouldn't have a business coach, because we all need a coach, and none of us are taught at uni to do it. And it's not even something that you could even read on Google. You need someone who's actually been there, done that in the trenches, and can see things for what they are.
Yeah, and it's fine the one that actually suits you. Like you said, you've been, like you said before, you'd been in the Hive, you'd been in Clinic Mastery, you'd gone to a couple of different places, you worked with Paul Wright, you've come along to some of my events that you've done, and I know we get along really well, but it's just finding it's finding your groove and finding where you fit. Some people love group
Yeah.
coaching. Some people prefer one-on-one. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, I've always liked both.
Yeah. And I must admit, I mean, you all have got such a different perspective of things. You can learn from every one of them.
Oh,
And
definitely.
every one of them is great in some aspect. So I've got some great things of all of it. I think that has been phenomenal. Even the podiatry profession itself with research, that has been a lot better because, you and I were brought up on Merton Root, and
Yeah,
his paradigm on, and that has changed so much since then. I mean, they're still using very similar orthotics to what we were taught like 35 years ago. So the information, and I must admit, like the academics I deal with, I mean, there's some really smart Australian podiatrists in the profession too, like in the teaching space. There are some
definitely.
really good. So, when I first started at Western Sydney, it was all women. There was hardly any men, any male academics. And I was like surrounded by all these really, really smart women. And even the people I was teaching with on the clinic, we would learn from each other because we'd all gone off into a different sphere when we graduated. So some had done high risk, some had done more biomechanic stuff, sporting stuff, pediatrics. It was just great to listen to every one of them. And I'm grateful for people like yourself with your podcast. I mean, how much I've learned from just listening to that, and then just going to that person's website, and I've picked up and going, oh my God.
That's how much I learned from the guests.
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
that to a guest once off air, and I just went, I feel guilty sometimes. People don't realize what I get out of putting this show together, because I get to talk to you now, which is great. I get to talk to you before I press record. I get to talk to you a little bit after. So I get stuff that people don't hear. Sometimes I wish we could record that, but then the show would get taken off air.
Yeah, it probably would, yeah.
But the benefit I also get, which is why I don't outsource my podcast to another company to do the editing. I do all the editing myself. I do the notes myself, because it's almost like my own education. It's my continuing education. Every week I'm putting this together, and I'm listening to other people's stories and their knowledge, their background. And yeah, so sometimes it's like a selfish indulgence.
But I mean, how many times do you pick up things on the second listen?
Oh, heaps.
I missed that the first time. Yeah, write that one down. Yeah.
Yeah, well, sometimes people talk about things. I go, I do not remember talking about that.
Yeah.
And I'm in the moment at the time, and I try not to, like, that's why I don't have any notes. Usually when I'm doing this, I don't write anything down because I don't want to be distracted with what's coming up next.
Yeah.
I'm trying to focus on
what'll
happen is I'll have a pen, and if you mention something like you had an illness,
yeah,
and then we go off that, I'll write down illness because I want to come back to it. Yeah, if the person lets me. And yeah, so when I go back and listen to it a second time, also that's why. So when I go back and listen to it a second time, I pick up so much more. And why I usually say to people, if you listen to a show and you really liked that guest, go back and listen to it again, and go back and listen to it again, because you'll pick up something new every time.
Yeah, I've had a few of your podcasts. I've actually gone back a couple of months later and think, I think I need to revisit that. So as I said, I think just the information that we've got access to is just, oh my God, so much better than what we ever used to have. And I know even when I was a student, the amount of textbooks we had to tell us like podiatric stuff was a handful.
Yeah.
And then you had to beg, borrow, and steal it from the library because they only had like one copy. And someone would have it out for 3 weeks, and then it was booked out for the next 3 weeks. So the access of what we've got available, I think, if a podiatrist is not learning, I think it's their own fault because there's so much more. And even me as an old timer, I'm still learning stuff. I still do stuff for my students when I'm at the unit. I'm still learning stuff from my pods who work for me. They've come up with something to go, oh, that's really good. Didn't know that. And I think the moment I stop learning is the moment I should really get out of the profession. So
yeah, definitely.
That's what I believe. Yeah.
There's like everyone in podiatry would know some other podiatrists that have never attended an event, sit in their clinic, and they're usually the miserable ones in podiatry, and they're the ones that probably fill up the complaints department at APRA and other places that are just, all they're doing is sitting back looking at why is everybody else happy or happier than what they are? Why are they miserable in their clinic? And to me, it's because they stop learning. They might pick up the odd something might come across on Facebook that they read, but they don't have they've lost the passion of wanting to learn. And I
Yes.
think should
Yeah.
never lose that. I don't care how long you're in this
Exactly.
profession. Keep learning the aspects of it that you really like. Do I want to know more about high risk feet? No, not
No.
interested. Never
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Me either.
But
That's hasn't been.
biomechanics, I loved biomechanics. I loved making orthotics. I loved sports injuries. And I know that, yes, I would probably get a patient that might be a high risk. So I'd have somebody else in my team who loved doing that and they could look after it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just finding your niche within the
Yeah,
industry as to where your passion is and growing from that. And there is information out there to grow it too. You can't say there's nothing out there. There is. There's someone who's doing something. There's the PED section, the sports section, just the MSK section. There's people, and you don't have to look exclusively within Australia. There's heaps in the UK that's coming out, like Jonathan and NK Podiatry. I mean, how good are those guys? And then you've got the States as well. I'm finding podiatrists from the States now, not as much because they're more surgery based now.
I know
But
it has changed.
you still got Kevin Kirby still coming out with stuff. But I find, the old Jatno journals, which was, back when in the 80s and the early 90s, was heaps of biomechanics stuff. And then it's all now turned down the surgery path, which for me doesn't actually interest me whatsoever. I'm happy
It's
to
true.
refer on for those type of things. I just want more, the biomechanical stuff, the theory behind why does this work and this doesn't. Where I know Craig Payne was kind of looking at that question very closely for many years. So I learned heaps from him. So I've always appreciated those ones who just think outside the box a little, because I'm not an out of the box thinker. I need
Yeah, well, you would have liked Mike Donato when he was on, the president of the
Yes.
American Academy of Podiatric Sports Medicine.
Yeah. It was really
And
interesting.
yeah, so we're going to meet up with him in Chicago in October when we do the marketing day. He's coming along to that, so it's going to be great to meet him in person. But when he was on the podcast and he mentioned that everything was going down that surgical path, but as soon as he found sports podiatry, he just that got him excited because there was always something new to learn. Whereas he said surgery, even though there's new stuff, he sort of found it a little bit boring.
Yeah, if it gets you, it gets you. And the thing is, too, I think we also need to look outside into like the physiotherapy world, occupational therapy, even osteopaths, chiropractic. There's a little bit in every industry we can all use.
Yeah, no, I agree. So before we wrap up, if there was a new or recent graduate listening to this, or it could be, podiatrist, that one of the ones we were talking about before, who's been sitting down a dark arcade with smoke-stained walls from the 70s, beige carpet, bit of wear mark down to the concrete and old chairs, magazines with dog ears. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
If they happen to be listening to this, well, what's the final message you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I think find what area really interests you, even if it's just cutting corns and calluses. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
No, and I think you need to find some people to talk to. I mean, which is, I've always, having social anxiety, I've always struggled with that. But I found, I have my group at the uni, I have my personal group of podiatrists, and I have my team. I think find your group of people to talk to. And, even though you go, this is not a work discussion, it always ends up as a work discussion.
It's true.
Yeah, find people who think like you. And you've got places like Facebook now. My God, how many groups are there on Facebook now?
There's a
You
lot.
find your people out there, find your people, and that will help, I hope, energize you with the profession.
No, that's a good way to finish. So, Narelle, I want to thank you for coming on the Podiatry Legends podcast, sharing some of your story. And I'm sure, like you said, I remember when you sent me your bio, you said, what have I got? What do you say? God, I really don't know what to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you've been in the profession for 35 years. I know that we could probably talk for hours and you would have something to contribute. So I just want to thank you for giving up your time and coming on here. It's been great.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.